At the same time he shot out a murderous spirit. It was a more refined intent to kill than anyone else had in the underworld. An energy that kept saying that he would kill you was like a silent lion's roar that made people unable to move an inch. In reality, the crazy mage's face began to change into a bright red tomato. If you want to kill me, it would be better to kill me fast. Or else I will poke out your eyes, feast on your heart, and burn your corpse to crisp someday. It was like a frantic effort. However, there was still quite a bit of malice. There would only be a few novices that could receive and withstand Muyang's murderous spirit close up. Of course, if he was to really release his murderous spirit, their bodies would burst. Nevertheless, while it was quite good, he didn't like it. Why did you come out already? Being Merlin's successor meant that the person needed to stay at the Blue Temple until he was ready. No matter how great of a talent you had, 1 year was absurd. He ran away. Merlin wouldn't have been easy with his training, and he would have run from the Blue Temple because he was sick of it. Well, what? Gulk. Muyang held his neck and raised it. The man struggled as he shivered his whole body before he flipped his eyes. Muyang's eyes were filled with silent anger. Merlin's successor. This title was enough to produce a disturbance in the underworld. The Great Magician was a title for those who could kill a demon king, and even demon gods depending on their skills. He had thrown that away. Before that hope was completed, he ran out as a defective product. How could he not be furious? He would have just died before he realized that he had received an undeserving blessing. If this arena had still been occupied by the Command Clan and not Muyang, this man would have become a good material to make juncture with. Plump. Muyang frowned as he threw the man on the floor. Cough. Cough. Listen carefully. Either way, he was a man who learned magic from Merlin. A man who learned authentic magic, and not skills used by people. If he could let him live and use him, he would become quite useful. Then as he looked around his surrounding, few thousands of eyes watched Muyang. This place is the underworld. Beginners. What could they know? Even more, the current situation was the worst for them. As soon as they came out, they were once again put into a war. Muyang looked at the sky of the arena. Soon, wyverns made up of bone flew up and started to break the barrier spell placed on the arena and enter the arena. Swoosh. Muyang took out anguish. And he spoke. This place is a battlefield. The followers of the Sky Devil had all sorts of different skills. Besides the skills given by the Sky Devil, they also had the skills they already had. Muyang couldn't predict all of their skills. Only because he thought of the worst-case scenario, he had already predicted the magical barrier of the arena would break soon. And so, around 500 were attacking from the air, the rest started to attack from the ground. However, the members of the Sun Guild and Muyang were tired of fighting. The beginners were frozen as they couldn't help but to just watch a fight between gods. Is he the same person? They say one thing after another. Fuck. Who are these people? The monsters in the Blue Temple were nothing. Amazement, shock, and deep sighs. The feeling each of them felt was different, but they were all unable to take their eyes off. A month was difficult at the Blue Temple. The monsters invaded every day and the lacked food supply. But the current battle was so dynamic that they didn't feel their days at the Blue Temple were nothing. The fighting style of Muyang was especially desperate. It was very aggressive with no backing up. At the very front, he destroyed the enemy's front line and made away. If he succeeded, he could reduce the damage to a minimum and annihilate the enemy, but if he was to fail, it was a tactic that would only lead to a useless death. Something that no one else could easily do. He had succeeded. Not just that. Monster. He was able to control death. The ones who were killed by him rose as undead. If there was someone who was more of a monster than a monster, it was him. Muyang hid his powers because of his position as the commander-in-chief of the Sun Guild. But after the Sky Devil trial started and when Lennon disappeared, he exhibited his powers. However, surprisingly no one reacted. It had been a disputed question from some time that he could control specters. They acted as though there wasn't anything particularly strange for him to have a skill like that because he had so many skills. A strong blood scent surrounded the place. Corpses were lined up in rows and there was no hesitation in killing a human. Ashura. The underworld was that sort of place. I need to live. In this sort of world? I have to kill to live. What if they kill us? However, it was a shock to them. It couldn't be helped. They thought everything would end when they get out of the Blue Temple. However, that was only the start. They just only finished their beginner's training. Especially Oscar was greatly shocked. Merlin's words were true. He said there were many strong men. However, Oscar considered himself the strongest. As there were no enemies in the Blue Temple, it was an obvious matter. Oscar felt like he became an absolute master and life was so dull when he was trapped in the Blue Temple. As Merlin wasn't human, Oscar wanted to win against other strong humans. He was self-satisfied. He became small. In this place, Oscar wasn't anything. In their eyes, Oscar was just one of many beginners. However, he was unsure who was the devil. If any of the two wanted to kill them as beginners, they wouldn't have any way to stop them. At last, Muyang, who cut off the last follower's neck, pulled Anguish back. Then the blood on Anguish was absorbed by Muyang. Devil. If there was a devil among them, it had to be that guy. Muyang's image made it seem so. A man who tramples and kills humans like ants and gave off a vicious energy. Oscar was certain as he repeated a spell. He thought he needed to do something first before Muyang killed him. Die. Water and wind, earth and fire and golden energy were merged together into one. It was the strongest magic Oscar could currently use. Even a devil wouldn't be safe after receiving this blow. Spat. A blue sphere with the energy of 5 elements flew towards Muyang. Then Muyang slowly turned around. He raised Anguish and within a blink of an eye he cut through the blue sphere. From the moment the energies were gathered, Muyang was aware of it. It was a strong wave of magical power than he had expected, but that was all. Seeing Muyang's actions that flowed naturally like water, Oscar opened his mouth wide. They say a stick is the medicine for a mad dog. Then Muyang placed Anguish back. He didn't kill him. Merlin's successor. Even if he only learned for a year, he was someone who could use authentic magic. It meant that his skills were quite good as well and would be of help in improving his territory. Of course, even if they had skills, it was normal for Muyang to instantly kill them when some attacked him. If he wasn't the successor of Merlin, the one who devoted himself to the humanity and tried to stop demon gods until the end, Muyang would have done so. It seemed necessary for Muyang to fix his state of mind. I'm fucked. Oscar instinctively felt what was going to happen from now on. And a moment later, Muyang had become a devil itself to Oscar. Hyacinth's eyes were dreamy. After finding out a fairy followed Muyang, she trusted him more. Now it didn't matter if he was a knight or not. Just by knowing Muyang, her heart fluttered. Fairies only followed true heroes. So Muyang was a hero. Even him hitting people is cool. And so she was blinded by love. Although everyone else clicked their tongue when they saw Oscar get beaten by Muyang, not Hyacinth. Even him getting blood on his fist is cool. Even when Muyang's fists were covered in blood and Oscar's whole body became a rag, Hyacinth looked at Muyang breathing with loving eyes. Even in the underworld there was love. Especially for a girl, those emotions can't be killed. And for Hyacinth, she was in her prime. If just one message didn't pop up. The guild master of the Sun Guild, Alexandro Quintart, has died. Hyacinth's eyes greatly widened. What the hell was that about? When a human who is close to a hero dies, everyone was sent this sort of message. They weren't sure if this truth was told so that people could be more hopeless or for them to work harder. But just by his influence, Alexandro Quintart was someone who was greater than a hero. His death was, of course, told to everyone and it approached them as something greater than a shock. But Hyacinth plumped down on the ground. The color of her face changed to blue. The guild master is? No way. It has to be a lie. The Sun Guild was also freaking out. Even to a normal guild member, Alexandro Quintart was a myth. The person who rose to the top from the very bottom. A man who didn't seem like he would die even if he was killed. And so even when he disappeared, there was an implicit trust that he would return. It was also the reason he wanted to quickly take care of the situation with Lenin. Since it was obvious that the leadership would be taken by Alexandro when he returned, Muyang planned to take some of the authority beforehand. But he died. The future has changed. Muyang also couldn't help but harden his expression. Alexandro Quintart was originally a figure who survived until the very end. One of the top 10 humans. He was so proficient in working behind the scenes that he utilized the forest of death the most. It wasn't possible for him to already depart this world. Something went wrong. And as a result he died. Alexandro definitely had a plan. He purposely hid himself and waited for the last blow. But that should have happened. From where and who? Muyang's eyes glowed once. Asterisk. Taken took back his sword. And held the arm that was dropped and once again placed it on the injured part. This humble servant has taken down a traitor. Soon a purple light was created and the arm was put back together. On the other hand, the corpse didn't answer. Alexandro Quintart fell to the ground after spitting out a handful of blood. This was the underground capital. A secret place that was connected to the Sky Library. However, the surrounding place was destroyed. Through Taken and Alexandro Quintart's fight, the terrain had changed. You are strong. Taken acknowledged him. If he wasn't careful he would have been killed himself. How was Taken in this underground capital? Moon currently couldn't leave the Sky Library. So he ordered Taken to kill him. Now the fruit has come to bear. The specters and the Sky Demon's strength were well matched. This might also have been the reason why Azura and the Sky Demon had similar tendencies. As if that wasn't enough, he earned a new sword. The Lunatic Killer's sword, that gave off a black energy. A sword whose abilities depended on the user. The closer they were to death, its abilities greatly increased, and as Taken used it, it instantly became an S rank. Thanks to this, Taken was able to grab hold of powers close to those of a transcendental being. If someone other than Taken arrived at this place, they wouldn't have been able to kill Alexandro. Then Taken grabbed a mirror that fell nearby. The Sun Mirror. It was the Sun Guild's godly object. The only item Alexandro took. When Taken saw it he couldn't help but be zoned out for a moment. He felt like his soul was being sucked in. He couldn't even let out a scream. He felt like he was wandering around inside of it for a long time. However, in the end he returned. There was no change in his outer appearance. His spirit was also similar. But then Taken hid the sun mirror within his cape. He didn't know why he did it. He didn't even sense it. He instinctively hid the mirror and forgot about it. Next target is the arena. The Sky Devil wants it reclaimed. As if nothing had happened, Taken moved. 1,000 Jiangshis followed behind him. Hyung Bish continued to perform his duties for the command clan. In reality, however, he was acting as a secret informant after destroying the hexagrams and infiltrating the Sky Library. Although he was an undead, he was highly utilizable because it was Muyang who made him. As long as he doesn't get noticed by Moon, who would smell Azura's scent, he would be able to sow even greater chaos. Hyung Bishnim, did you hear? Alexandro has died. Sheet. We are the ones who are loyal, but why would he give such an important mission to that guy? Shouldn't we do something? I think it would be difficult to gain any more contribution even if we stay here. Hyung Bish was strong power within the command clan. Of course, there were a lot of people who followed him. However, he was now just an undead after losing to Muyang. Hyung Bish shook his head. If he left the Sky Library, he would be unable to send Muyang information in real time. In this type of situation, time was of the essence. Information was also the same. It's important to protect this place. As Hyung Bish spoke as if he squeezed his voice out, the surrounding mood quickly became gloomy. If you wanted an even greater blessing of the Sky Devil, you needed to contribute. However, they would lack it just by protecting the Sky Library. Did Moon not say anything? No. Atukanim and Runapapanim have already left the Sky Library. Now, when Alexandro's death is confirmed, they say it's the best time to destroy the Sun Guild. It seems like Taken will also soon head to the arena. Tuka and Runapapa did. Like Hyung Bish, the two were both super strong within the Command Clan. Two of the three most influential people left the Sky Library. Additionally, Taken would join. It was already a level past overkill. More than half of the soldiers stationed at the Sky Library were now focused on one place. The new devoted were slowly gathering. Even powerful specters and jiangshis. They numbered roughly 50,000. On the other hand, the Sun Guild only had about 14,000 people left. There were also the beginners, but it was hard to say they would be of great help. Muyang, who was within Hyung Bish's conscience inwardly, was concerned about it. If he could just delay the time even for a bit. We will also join them. Since this happened, there was only a muddy fight left. Asterisk. There are only 541 hours left. The number of survivors 385,598. The rank of targets for elimination will be shown. First priority target for elimination 15,000 points. Hyacinth. Second priority target 10,000 points. Bahamut. Third priority target 5,000 points. Itsuki Yuka. Fourth priority target 3,000 points. Muyang. The locations the top 5 people will be shown to devotees. In addition, you will receive specters attack more violently. If you die, that soul will also belong to the Sky Devil. The Sky Devil makes an offer. Will you become a devotee? If you accept, you can receive the Sky Devil sword. Yes. Lawless Jean disappeared from the rankings. Instead, Muyang went up the ranks. Also, the Sky Devil bet an S-rank weapon on Muyang. He couldn't help but grin. By comparing with Hyacinth, it seemed like the Sky Devil only made these offerings to Muyang. The one with the least faith. To the Sky Devil, I'm a dagger and poison. Even if the Sky Devil was a real god, Muyang would still ignore him. Muyang would only believe in himself and had no faith in illusions. So, to the Sky Devil who needed to seek faith, Muyang was the most difficult opponent. Of course, it did appeal to his taste. S-rank Sky Devil sword. If Muyang was to receive the Sky Devil's blessing on top, he could enter the ranks of the top 10 humans without having to use acceleration. But, to believe what it says plainly, there was something he didn't mention about Azura. To be exact, Muyang was already devoted to Azura. The moment Muyang became a Sky Devil's devotee, Azura would rage. He couldn't be a devotee of both gods. From that influence, the Sky Devil couldn't protect Muyang. It wasn't really a benefit either. It was better to cut down its faith to the ground and receive a reward from Azura. Mumuyang Nim. I have completed 500 flags. Hee. Oscar, whose face was swollen like a goldfish, cautiously approached him. Oscar was beaten so brutally that his whole body shivered in fear. Of course, it would only be temporary, but to Muyang, it was enough for him to just follow his instructions during the battle. In reality, Muyang was good at torture. Not killing them but only making them feel pain. He just didn't like torturing, but if he wanted to do it, he could do it more cruelly than anyone else. Place the flags on top of the arena. Okay. Thanks to the sky blessing from Muyang, this Oscar will definitely place all the flags at the ends of the arena and show the enemy our discipline. That's a long and unnecessary comment. I'll go and place them. As Muyang shook his fist once, Oscar felt appalled and ran off. Was Oscar rambling? Anyhow, Oscar's color was strong. It seemed like his nature didn't die through this much. So that's probably why he ran from Merlin. Afterwards, Muyang turned his gaze. 500 large flags with the Sun Guild's mark were placed at all the corners of the arena. Each was made by a beginner. Afterwards, they were placed at all parts of the arena and made visible to all around. The enemies were already aware the Sun Guild was within the arena. It meant that he didn't really need to advertise it like this. However, what about others who weren't enemies? As long as there was a slight chance that people moved to join them, it was something they needed to do. Either way, someone would come after seeing the Sun Guild's mark. I have no time. Just time was the problem. Enemies were gathering. The situation at the Sky Library Myung saw through Hyungbish was tough. Even if they delayed as most as they could, they would raid within 10 days. On the other hand, the Sun Guild's fighting spirit was continuously dropping. Especially after confirming the message that Alexandro died. To change the wind again, he had no choice but to rely on pure luck. And those thoughts of Myung were fortunately correct. Hyacinth. No, do I now have to call you Guildmaster? Bahamudnim. Hyacinth greeted him with a friendly smile. The Luminescent Guild. The guild master of that place, Bahamud, appeared. The 5,000 people he brought were all members of the Luminescent Guild. Almost half showed signs of battle. I have heard the news. It's unfortunate. I also liked him quite a lot. Thank you. However, I'm okay. I decided to be sad when this trial is over. The flower has now bloomed. Bahamud was greatly pleased. He was 2 m tall and his whole body was muscular as if he had taken steroids. However, there was no hair on his entire body. In many ways, he was a figure of strong impressions. Also, it seems like you are Myung. Bahamud turned his gaze and looked at Myung. From the beginning, it wasn't really a good impression. He gave off a strong fighting spirit and energy and pressured Myung. He gave off a refined, invisible energy that even surprised Myung. However, Myung didn't even budge. He just looked at Bahamud with completely calm eyes. Then Bahamud was surprised instead. You don't counter it but just brush it off? My energy. If Myung had countered it, Bahamud wouldn't be this surprised. However, he had brushed all of it off. In other words, Myung had assimilated his energy. Everyone's energy was different. If there were 5,000 people, there were 5,000 unique energies. Since the life they lived were different, the energy couldn't be the same. But he could assimilate to his opponent's energy and their fighting spirit? Where would such person exist in the world? As expected. They said there was a whirlwind that stirred up the Sun Guild. Now as I look at it, it seems like it was actually a typhoon. Bahamud took back his energy. Take care of your life. I am very excited to fight with you. After leaving a challenging remark, he entered the arena, followed by the 5,000 people. Kim Taehwan. Among them, Taehwan was also included. By seeing how he was near the front, it seemed like his contributions regarding the interaction with the Sun Guild were acknowledged. Taehwan lowered his head slightly. Myung answered with his eyes. Myungnim, don't take what he said to heart. Bahamud always acts like that when he meets a strong person. If he acts like that, it's really the best reception. Hyacinth replied. I don't mind. Even if he talks rough, Bahamud is kind. Even Alexandro had acknowledged it. Bahamud was the only guild master who was friendly to Alexandro. Alexandro had a lot of enemies. You could say there was virtually no group that viewed him favorably. However, only Bahamud acknowledged and approached him. Bahamud. He had that sort of personality. Myung was also aware of it. How could Myung not know, since he was the one who killed him before he returned to the past? It was just ironic because it was Alexandro who plotted against Bahamud and placed a request to the Forest of Death. Quite a few survivors gathered in the arena. Soon, the number of people gathered reached 30,000. They removed the beginners from their number. There were almost 50,000 beginners, but they were relegated to rear support. The command clan is storming in. Best estimated number 70,000. 70,000? It was more than expected. Myung knitted his brows. And he climbed the top of the arena. Lawless Gene. There is Lawless Gene among the enemies. I don't believe it. What? Lawless Gene. Are you saying that the entire Lawless clan became followers? This is crazy. There was a commotion. 70,000. Perhaps there were more enemies than that approaching the arena. Among them, there was Lawless Gene, the head of the Lawless clan. It was definitely unusual for one of the 5 great clans to surrender. Sush. Myung took out anguish. Things already happened and they couldn't be taken back. Taken. Lawless Jean. The command clan. Soon they disappeared out of his sight. However, the one whom Myung imprinted in his eyes continued to be visible. Taken. It seemed like after Bae Sungmin escaped he became brainwashed. However, since he had appeared as an enemy, Myung couldn't just stand by and be attacked. If he wanted to kill him, he would kill him. Lawless Jean was relaxed. This fight. It was a fight impossible to lose. Others within the clan expressed their worries, but Lawless Jean spoke with certainty. We won't lose. However, their reactions were lukewarm. Our opponent is the Sun Guild. Plus, if the Luminescent Guild has joined forces, their power. You're correct. Having superior numbers isn't everything. We didn't need to follow the Sky Devil, no? Lawless Jean clicked his tongue. These ignorant bastards. Of course he understood. However, it wasn't right to show worry after coming this far. But as the head of the clan, he needed to explain to his members who he had somewhat forcefully dragged to this fight. Listen. Do you guys know why Alexandro wasn't on the list to be eliminated? Wasn't he just missing? Stupid. The reason why he hasn't appeared as one of the people to be eliminated was that he was already a devoted of the Sky Devil. There was silence. They were surprised but weren't able to say anything. However, he really did have a point. If someone was a devotee, they didn't appear on the list to be eliminated. It meant they could disappear like the wind. After seeing everyone's reaction, Lawless Jean continued to speak. Alexandro had already thrown away the Sun Guild. He acted like that as he was certain that the Sky Devil would win. I also see it that way. However, Alexandro died as a traitor.